Amina followed cautiously behind Yusuf as they entered the grand throne room. The sheer magnificence of the chamber left her breathless. Its towering pillars, golden chandeliers, and rich tapestry depicting generations of royal lineage. At the far end, seated on a throne of shimmering gold, was the king. His presence was commanding. His robes were embroidered with symbols of power, and his piercing eyes settled on Amina with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. The murmurs among the nobles grew louder. Who is she? The prince married a commoner? Unacceptable. The queen stood beside the king, her expression unreadable. Yusuf, unfazed by the weight of judgment surrounding them, stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Father," he said with respect, "I have returned." The king's eyes flickered with recognition, but his gaze remained stern. "You disappeared for 2 years without a word," he said, his voice deep and unwavering, "and now you returned with a wife." His tone made it clear he was not pleased. Yusuf lifted his chin. "Yes, her name is Amina, and she is my wife." Amina swallowed, feeling the intensity of the king's stare shift towards her. She knew she had to be strong, but her hands trembled at their sides. The king studied her, his expression giving nothing away. "Step forward," he commanded. Amina hesitated for a fraction of seconds before obeying. She stepped toward the throne, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room watching her every move. "What is your name, girl?" the king asked. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "My name is Amina, Your Majesty." His gaze bore into her, searching, evaluating. "And where do you come from?" "From a small village, far from your palace land," she replied truthfully. The king leaned forward slightly. "You are not of noble blood? You are not royalty? You have not been trained in the ways of royalty? What makes you think you can stand beside my son as his wife?" Amina felt a lump form in her throat, but she refused to let it show. She straightened her back, meeting the king's gaze head on. "Because I may not have noble blood, but I have a noble heart," she said firmly. "I was raised with hardship, but I have never given up. I will stand by my husband's side with loyalty, strength, and dignity, and I will learn. If I am to be his wife, then I will be worthy of the title." A stunned silence filled the room. Even the queen's eyebrows lifted slightly in surprise. The king's expression remained unreadable for a long moment. Then he leaned back into his throne. "You are bold, young girl," he finally said. "But boldness alone does not make a queen." Amina's chest tightened. Was this a rejection? She wondered. The king then turned to Yusuf. "You have made your decision, and I will not undo it. But if your wife is to remain in the palace, she will learn our ways, and she will be trained, tested, and judged. If she fails, she will not be allowed to stay." Yusuf's jaws tightened, but he nodded, understood further. The king waved his hands dismissively. "Then it is settled. The girl will stay. But I warn you, Amina, this palace is not forgiving." Amina lowered her head respectfully. "I understand, Your Majesty," she said. As she and Yusuf turned to leave, she felt the weight of 1,000 gazes still lingering on her. She had won the first battle, but the war has just begun. Amina awoke to the first morning of her new life in the palace. Unlike the quiet, humble home she had shared with Yusuf in the village, the palace was a world of luxury and scrutiny. She was summoned early, led by a group of stern-faced palace attendants to the royal courtyard. There, she found herself surrounded by nobles' women, women of high birth, daughters of ministers, and members of the royal councils. Their expressions were anything but welcoming. At the center of the courtyard stood the queen, regal and composed. She eyed Amina with the same coldness she had the previous night. "You are to undergo training," the queen announced. "If you are to be the prince's wife, you must learn how to walk, speak, and behave like royalty." Amina swallowed and nodded. This was expected, but the sheer intensity of the moment made her heart pound. The queen raised a hand and a servant stepped forward holding a golden pot. "Balance this on your head," the queen instructed, "and walk from one end of the courtyard to the other without dropping it." The noble women chuckled softly, their eyes gleaming with amusement. Amina took the pot. It weighed heavier than expected. She placed it carefully on her head, adjusting her posture. She took her first step, and the weight wobbled and her heart raced. She took another step, determined to prove herself. The noble women whispered among themselves, watching eagerly, waiting for her to fail. Amina bit her lips, focusing one step at a time. For a moment, she thought she had mastered it until one of the noble women suddenly accidentally kicked a small stone in her path. Amina stumbled and the golden pot tilted dangerously and crashed. It fell to the ground, sending a loud clack echoing through the courtyard. The noble woman burst into laughter. Amina clenched her fist. Humiliation burnt in her chest, but she refused to let her emotions show. The queen, however, did not laugh. She simply sighed. "A long way to go, indeed," she muttered. Amina picked up the pot, placed it back on her head, and stood tall. "I will try again." The queen raised an eyebrow. The noble woman stopped laughing. Amina stepped forward once more. She had stumbled, but she refused to break, because she was more than a girl from the village now. She was more than their amusement. She would become something greater, no matter how many times she had to try. Amina didn't give up. With slow and careful step, she tried again. The golden pot rested on her head, heavier than before, but this time she was prepared. Each step she took was more confident than the last. The noble women were no longer laughing. Instead, they whispered among themselves, exchanging glances of surprise. Amina's back straightened. She would not falter this time. One step, then the other. She reached the end of the courtyard. Then, with careful precision, she turned gracefully, elegantly, as if she had been raised in royalty all her life. And then she walked back. The queen's eye narrowed slightly, but for the first time, there was a flicker of something in them. Was it approval? When Amina reached the starting point, she lowered the pot gently and stood tall. Silence. The noble women had nothing to say. The queen, after a long pause, finally spoke. "Impressive," she said. Amina exhaled heavily, but she did not let herself smile. She knew this was only the beginning. One trial had ended, but many more lay ahead, said the queen. Amina had passed her first test, but the palace had more trials waiting for her. The next challenge was one of intellect. The queen had summoned her to the palace library, a vast hall filled with scrolls, books, and ancient wisdom that stretched back centuries. There, a scholar named Elder Jibril awaited her, an old man with piercing eyes that seemed to reach through her soul. "In this palace," he said, "beauty and grace are not enough. A future queen must be wise." He handed her a parchment, its edges slightly burnt from age. "These are questions only those with keen minds can answer. If you fail, then you are no better than a common villager who has no place in this palace." The noble women smirked, eager to see her fail. Amina took the parchment and began to read. The questions were riddles, ancient proverbs, puzzles wrapped in wisdom. The first question: a river does not flow backward, yet the wise man can see the past. What does this mean? Amina thought carefully. Then she answered, it means that while life moves forward, wisdom allows us to learn from the past. Only fools ignore history. Elder Jubril nodded slowly. Correct. A few noble women frowned. The next question: a man who chases 2 rats catches none. What lesson does this teach? Amina didn't hesitate. It means that greed and lack of focus lead to failure. One must be disciplined enough and choose wisely. Elder Jubril raised his eyebrow. Impressive, he said. The murmur around the hall grew. The noble women were whispering now, their small confidence slowly fading. Finally, Elder Jubril placed one last riddle before her. I have cities but no houses. I have mountains but no trees. I have water but no fish. What am I? Amina furrowed her brows. This one was different. It wasn't just a proverb, it was a trick question, a riddle. She read it again. Cities but no houses, mountains but no trees. Then suddenly she understood. A map, she answered. The entire room fell silent. Elder Jubril stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a deep, satisfied laugh. She is clever, he declared. She has passed the test. Amina let out a breath she didn't realize she has been holding for long. But as she glanced at the queen, she noticed something unsettling. The queen was not smiling. Her expression remained cold and unreadable. Amina had faced every test: the test of grace, the test of wisdom, and the test of patience. And with each challenge, she had proven herself worthy. The queen, once cold and distant, now regarded her with something rare: respect. You have surprised me, Amina, she said one afternoon. I thought you were nothing but a simple village girl, but I see now that strength, intelligence, and dignity are not bound by birth. She turned to the noble women, her voice firm. Amina shall be accepted as the future queen of this land. She has earned her place beside Prince Yusuf. The noble women who once mocked her now lowered their heads in humility and bowed before her. Yusuf stepped forward, his smile warm. I always knew you were special, my love, he said. Tears welled up in Amina's eyes, but she held them back. She was no longer the timid girl who had once feared her fate. She was now a queen in waiting. Months later, Amina returned to her village, not as the poor orphan girl they had once pitied, but as a queen to be. A grand procession accompanied her. Drummers played, dancers twirled, and golden chariots rolled through the dusty village road. People gathered in amazement. Is this Amina? One of the villagers asked. The very same people who had ignored her suffering now bowed before her. At the front of the crowd stood Aunt Memuna. Her face had lost all colors. Her hands trembled. She could not believe her eyes. Amina? She stammered. Amina stepped forward, her head held high. You once called me a burden, she said. You sold me off like I was worthless. Aunt Memuna fell on her knees. Please, forgive me, my child. Amina took a deep breath. She had every right to seek revenge, but instead she simply said, I will not repay evil with evil. But know this, your wickedness will never be forgotten. She turned away, walking past her stunned aunt, towards the village square, where she addressed the people. I was once a girl without a future, she said, but fate had other plans. Let this be a lesson. Never look down on someone because of where they come from. You do not know what destiny has in store for them. The crowd erupted in cheers. As the drum played and the celebration continued, Amina smiled. She had gone from a helpless orphan to a queen. Her journey had been painful, but in the end, it had all been worth it. And that is the end of the story. Moral lessons. Never underestimate anyone. You do not know what the future holds for them. 2. True wealth is not just money, but wisdom, character, and resilience. 3. Kindness and patience will always outshine greed and wickedness. 4. One's background does not determine their destiny. Hard work and perseverance can change everything. 5. Forgiveness is powerful, but people must also face the consequences of their action. Did you enjoy this story? If you love inspiring African folk tales like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out another exciting tale from this channel. Let us know in the comment section, what lesson did you learn from Amina's journey? Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more amazing stories. Bye.